Sermon 35, A Nation Lost.
If we were to choose a title for our lesson tonight, it would be A Lost Nation. Unfortunately, Israel, after having gone through all that they had gone through and all the promises they had made to God to be faithful, we'll find once again tonight that they were unfaithful to God. And Moses again will have to intercede on their behalf. And once again God will punish them for their disobedience. But this time the punishment will last longer than it ever had for the children of Israel. They were in the wilderness of Paran, there at Kadesh. Everything had been ready. They had moved a 3 days journey out into the wilderness there. Moses assembled the congregation of Israel together, and from the instructions he had received from God, he was to send spies into the promised land. He was to select one leader from each tribe. I'm assuming, the Bible says that it was a leader of the different tribes, and I'm assuming it was possibly one of the elders from each tribe that had been chosen by Moses under God's instructions to help him oversee the children of Israel. But the Bible doesn't specifically say that. It's just an assumption on my part. But he is selected, and there in the book of Numbers chapter 13, it gives the names of all those that were selected. Interesting in our study tonight, in the story that we will unveil for you, is that there are two names that we are all familiar with, and that is Joshua and Caleb. And we're familiar with them because of the strength and courage that they displayed. There are 10 other men that were participating in this act of going into the land and spying the land, but I doubt that anyone ever remembers any of their names. But Joshua and Caleb have been known and are known by most Bible students because of their faithfulness to God in our story tonight. So Moses selected a man from each tribe. He selected 12 total, and he gave them these instructions. I want you to go in and I want you to look at the land. I want you to go in, I want you to look at the people. I want you to look at the land itself, the fruit of the land. I want you to look at the cities. Basically, they were to go in and to come back and report just exactly how they were going to go up and take the land. Now, God did not instruct them to go up and see if they could go in and take the land. That was not part of the instructions. The instructions were that they were to go in and they were to see exactly how they would make their entry into the land and bring back a report from the type of land that it was and a report on the people of the land. Now remember that God had told them and promised Abraham and promised the forefathers to all the children of Israel down to this time that he was going to give them this land because he had promised it to Abraham, and it would be a land that was flowing with milk and honey. The book of Deuteronomy, when Moses was instructing the children of Israel and telling them to keep God's laws and telling them that if they did that, when they would get in the land, that they would prosper. That they would be in a land where there would be cities that they did not build. They would live in houses that they did not build. They would enjoy the fruits of the vineyards which they did not plant. And so all of these blessings, the olive trees and all of these things, they have been promised that they would be given to them freely if they would just simply obey God and keep His commandments. So this was the promise that God had made, and now Moses is sending these 12 men into the land to go in and bring back a report. And they were to go in and they were to be there in the land as spies for 40 days and 40 nights. And then they were to come back and they were to give their report as to what the land was like and how they were to go in. When the spies go in, I'm sure that like most people that would go in to spy out, they made themselves unaware to the inhabitants of the land. And they probably mixed and mingled among the shepherds and farmers and those that lived in the land, and they went about and they traveled all over the land making notes and observing everything that was there, and they came back and of course reported to Moses. Well, when they came back, they came to Moses and Aaron and all the children of Israel that were waiting there in the wilderness of Paran. After 40 days, we say they were gone approximately a month and a half. And they came back, and Moses asked about the land, and they told him, said, yes, it is a very good land, and they had brought back a cluster of grapes. It was time for the grape harvest in the land, and this cluster of grapes, and I can't even imagine this. I've seen some very beautiful grapes, but I've never seen grapes so large and so plentiful that it took two men to carry a cluster. But they brought back a cluster of grapes, and the men carried them back, and they were able to see. So truly it was a land flowing with milk and honey. Now up until this point, the report is very positive. They're saying, yes, everything that we've heard about the land is very true. But then 10 of the spies said this. They said, nevertheless, that is, although the land is just exactly as it had been described, it says, nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land. I mean, they're really strong. And not only that, the cities have walls. They're wall cities, and the walls are very great. And said, not only that, not only are these people strong, and not only are the walls of these cities very great, but also we saw the sons of Anak there. And the descendants of Anak were giants. They were large men in stature. And describing these giants, if you please, the people said that we were as grasshoppers in our own sight, and so were we in their sight. And that is that these people that we see in the land, that we're just like grasshoppers. And they said not only that, but in this land there are the Amalekites that are in the south. There's the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites that dwell in the mountains, and in the Canaanites they dwell by the sea. And they went on and they talked about all of these people that were in the land of Canaan that they were to go and possess, as if it was surprising to them. But God had told them many times when He said, I'm going to give you the land, He said, I'm going to give you the land that is owned or possessed by 7 nations greater than yourself. And He lists for them all of these nations, the Amalekites and the Hittites and Jebusites and the different nations of the Canaanites. And God said that they are indeed nations greater, that is in the sense of number and power and things of this nature, than yourselves. But God said, I'm going to give you the land. Now Caleb recognized at this point exactly what was taking place in the conversation that Moses and Aaron and the elders there in Israel were having with these 10 spies that came back. And Caleb wanted to change the direction of the conversation, and Caleb got the attention of the people, and he said before Moses, he said, let us go up at once and possess it. Now he changes and wants to get back on a positive note now. Let's go up and at once possess it. He said, for we are well able to overcome it. Now the reason that Caleb said that, because he believed in God. He believed that God would deliver his people, and indeed God would, because God said he would. And he believed in that. God said to Abraham, he said to Isaac, he said to Jacob, I have given you the land. And he says now to the children of Israel, I've given you the land, and all you need to do is just go up and possess it. And I remind you as we begin the study tonight that he did not say, to the spies, Moses did not say, I want you to go up and see if we can do it. I want you to go up and see how we're going to do it. And there's a big difference. There's a huge difference in trying to decide if we can do something. You know, it's been said that one man and God make a majority. If God is on your side, who can be against you? But the 10 spies forgot that. Caleb did not. He said, we can go up and we can take it. But the men that went up with him, they said, we're not able to go against this people, for they're stronger than we are. We can't go up there and do that. You know, and so they brought up an evil report, and they wanted to turn the people around, and you know, and they were afraid of these giants that they saw. Later on in history, we're going to see an event that would take place that's similar to this, as King Saul has his army encamped to do battle against the Philistines. And one of these descendants of Anak is going to be a fellow by the name of Goliath, and he's coming out every day, taunting the children of Israel and saying, send out your fiercest warrior, you know, send him out, and if he can kill me, you won the battle. And the children of Israel were just shaking in their boots, and they were afraid to go out, and they were afraid to fight against Goliath. And you know, and even their armor, and David, a young shepherd boy, that the only weapon that he had ever had was a little sling that he carried in his pouch to scare the animals away from his daddy's sheep, came up to his brothers to bring them food from home and to get a report as to how the battle was going. And there sat his brothers, and they were just like the rest of the children of Israel, and they were afraid and shaking in their boots. And David said, how goes the battle? You know, what's going on here? And they say, oh, you're just a kid. You don't need to know anything about this. And then David heard the loudmouth Goliath as he stood out there and said, taunting the children of Israel and saying, send out your warrior, and if he can defeat me, you have won the battle, and we'll be your servants, and things of this nature. And David looked at his brothers and said, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of God? Isn't that a bold statement from such a young man? Who is he? David said, I'll go out and fight him, and his brothers told him, well, you're just a kid, just shut up. Just be quiet. Don't even say these things. King Saul heard about the boastings of David, and he called for David. And King Saul said, how are you going to go out and fight this man? David said, I one time I killed a lion and I killed a bear. I wasn't afraid of them because God was with me. King Saul said, well, let me put my armor on you. Let me just load you down my armor. David, a little boy, and Saul, a big man. The Bible says that when Saul was selected, he stood shoulder and head taller than any man in Israel. He was a big man. David, a little bitty fella. Put this armor on him, and you could almost see how awkward that looked with David wearing King Saul's armor. And David took that off and said, I don't need that. And Saul said, well, take my sword. And David said, I don't need that. He said, where are you going to go out and fight him with? He said, I'm going to fight him with my sling. He went out and he picked him some smooth stones and put them in his pouch. And he went out before Goliath, and Goliath said, what do y'all send out here to fight with me? Just a kid. Am I a dog that I'm going to fight against a young child? And David said, the Lord is on my side. And he loaded his sling, and he slung it around, and the giant came tumbling down. And he took the giant's own sword, which he could barely lift because it was so large, and he decapitated Goliath. The same situation with the children of Israel and the 10 spies seeing the people in the land saying, oh, we can't go up there and do this. We can't do this. And they were so worried about it, the Bible said the children of Israel cried all night. They cried all night. They were just worried to death. They couldn't sleep. They had forgot about God. They had forgot about how God had delivered them from one of the greatest nations in historical times, the nation of Egypt. How with a mighty hand He had brought them out. He had freed them from Egyptian bondage. He had parted the Red Sea and led them across. He had been feeding them with manna and quail and taking care of their every need as they had been now for almost 2 years in the wilderness. And they had forgot that. And God almost, as we could vision God looking at this and seeing, Joshua and Caleb telling the people, why are you doing this? Why are you not going up and doing what God has told us to do? We can go and we can do this. And they spake as a company of people. And they said, the land which we passed through to search it is an exceeding good land. If the Lord delight in us, let Him bring us into the land, let Him give it to us. Joshua and Caleb said, if it's the desire of God, we'll go into the land and we'll take it. The people said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. Let's find us a leader that can take us back to Egypt. They did not want to go in and take the land. They said, let's just find us somebody that will lead us back to Egypt. Let's just tuck our tail between our legs and go home. And they considered Egypt to be that home. And God said, why do you rebel against me? You see, the cloud had moved in and sat over the tabernacle, and they knew God was speaking. Why have you rebelled against me? How long will this people provoke me, God said. How long will it be ere they believe me for all the signs which I have showed among them? God said, all the miracles and the wonders that I did, how long will these people just ignore that and disobey me? And disobey me. And the people said, we would that we had died in Egypt rather than to go into the promised land and take it as God had said. We would that we just die out here in this wilderness rather than go up and take the promised land. And God said, you have basically pronounced your own sentence. Because that's exactly what's going to happen. For every day that the spies were in the land, you'll spend 1 day in the wilderness. For 40 days, you'll spend 40 years. And you'll stay here for 40 years until everyone that's over the age of 20 that's rebelled against me dies out here in this wilderness. That's what God told them. He said, you pronounced your own sentence. You said you'd rather die here in this wilderness. That's exactly what I'm going to give you. Only 2 people over the age of 20 is going to be able to enter the promised land. That's Joshua and that's Caleb. Because they did what I told them to do. They were obedient. When the people heard what God had said, they said, well, wait a minute now. Because one of the things that convinced them to cause them to change their mind was that the 10 spies that went into the land, God struck them with a plague and they all died. They all died. And the people saw that. And they were afraid. And they said, well, let's go up now and possess it. And Moses and Aaron said, don't go up there now. God's not going to be with you. You've already pronounced your sentence. Don't go up there. Let's go up, they said. Let's go up on the mountain. Let's begin. Let's start right here. Let's go in. Let's just destroy the people. And so they took off up the mountain like a bunch of fools. And the people defeated them. The people of the land defeated them. And sent them back running. You see, it was too late. God had already decided, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to let this people go in. They're too afraid to go. They're disobedient unto me. They're going to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. That wasn't God's plan. He didn't want that to happen. But once again, the children of Israel could not bring themselves to do that which they promised to do, and that was to be obedient unto God. And God said, how long? How long will you continue to provoke me? How long? And you know, God once again presented to Moses the idea of maybe I need just kill all these people and raise up children from you. And once again, Moses said, you can't do that. You can't do that. Because the people will say, you just brought us out here to kill us. So now, our story in the Bible takes a turn from its direction of going from Egypt to the Promised Land. Now we're going to have 40 wasted years. 40 wasted years for the people in the wilderness. And the attention will be turned not to the goal of getting the nation of Israel into the Promised Land per se, but from the goal of teaching those young people that they need to be obedient. The Bible will spend 40 years instructing those under the age of 20, trying to get them to learn from the mistakes that their elders made. Don't do this. When it comes your time to enter the Promised Land, you be ready to go in. You be ready to follow the commandments of God. And the lessons will be learned, and it's a hard lesson. And they will be reminded by Joshua and by Caleb. They will be reminded by the memories of their fathers and grandfathers. They were too afraid to go in and take the land, and their carcasses fell in the wilderness. God has promised through His Son a promised land for His people. A promised land. Jesus said, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. And you know, some people won't come. There's still people today that say, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in Jesus Christ. But He still has offered that opportunity to come. But one day, just like that song we sometimes sing, there's a great day coming. A great day coming. When the patience and love of God will reach its conclusion. And Jesus said, only the Father knoweth that day. But when that day comes, there will be no more opportunity for those in this life to enter into the Promised Land. It comes for a lot of people every day. There are a lot of people that leave this world each and every day, and they do not enter the Promised Land. Moses, in talking about this group of people that we call the Israelites, said, brethren, my heart's desire and prayer for them, that is Israel, is that they might be saved. God did not want His people to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. They did so by their own choice. And they pronounced their own sentence. That they said, we'd rather die in the wilderness than to be obedient unto God and take the land. If you're here tonight and need to respond to the invitation, won't you do so while we stand and while we sing?